Hold on, sorry.
I'm Executive Director Carson Tappner. We've taken a long recess in broadcasting and are returning to you with a follow-up interview of our previous episode's guest, Professor Terry Cooke of the China Partnership of Greater Philadelphia and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development's Energy Efficiency Building Laboratory partner for Philadelphia and Tianjin. Joining me in discussion with Terry is Ben Leffel, the Director of Research for the Tai Initiative. Ben is conducting his doctoral research on the global environmental networking of cities in China and the United States. Terry, Ben, good day, and thanks for taking time to be with me on this broadcast.
Good to be here, Carson.
Thank you.
Before we turn to our discussion, I want to announce to our listeners and viewers the appearance of our newest education channel, the Tai Initiative podcast. You can find it on Spreaker.com. That's speaker with an R inside, Spreaker.com. Much of what TI has been saying since its founding 4 years ago is a totally new way of thinking about America-China relations. Like anything worth really learning, it takes a while for it to be truly learned through and through. The podcast has been designed to give you the ability to truly learn this subject over a period of time, on demand, listening at the times best suited to your lifestyle and schedule. We hope you'll check it out. And you can find this podcast on Spreaker.com just by searching for Tai Initiative, and it will come up. And don't forget to share what you've learned on the show or on these Tai Luntans by posting comments to the Tai Initiative Facebook page. If you like what you're learning from us, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter, which can easily be done from the homepage, tainitiative.org. Just sign up at the top middle of the photo. And now let's get on to the subject of today's episode. The COP21 in Paris last December marked a significant point in the global dialogue on climate change. Within the functionality of that particular topic, climate change, we had an opportunity to see inside the conference evidence of the trend toward increasing subnational strength worldwide. This global trend at the city and state level has, of course, particular ramifications for the America-China relationship. And here at the Tai Initiative, we feel strongly that this broad area of environmental action and clean technology development is a treasure trove of opportunity for local and regional governments nationwide to make the most of their subnational advantages. We want, through programs such as this one today, to encourage local leaders, such as mayors, to sort out and kind of lean into the subject, engaging it with a deeper level than they might have comfortably felt previously, and thereby achieve their goals. Inspiring and assisting local leadership to do just that really is the purpose of not only this program, but the Tai Initiative organization as a whole. So Terry, I want to open up today hearing from you about the 2 or 3 most important points of evidence you can share with us that appeared in or around the COP21 that do or do not show the ball advancing in this subnational strength. Thanks so much again for being with us.
Well, thank you, Carson. I will, in one moment, give 2 specific examples of that. If I may begin with a framing remark that draws out some of the points that you just made. This is a long process, and it does take time, but there is very clear evidence of a trend now in the direction of meaningful action by cities and states. To introduce my own organization for one moment, China Partnership of Greater Philadelphia was created in 2011 for the specific purpose of mobilizing the 3-state, 13-county area of Greater Philadelphia, which includes southeastern Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey, and 1 county in Delaware, to support the U.S. government's 10-year framework of U.S.-China cooperation in energy and environment. And as little as a year ago, Mayor Nutter's Office of Sustainability's director was commenting that there really wasn't a pathway for cities to clearly support the global process trying to address climate change. That has changed in less than 12 or 18 months. The breakthrough at COP21 in Paris is one of the things that's changed it. So the framework we're looking at here is there's a global level of action, there's a national level of action, there's a subnational level of action, and even we need to think about this in terms of our own individual action as well. The climate change issue for more than 25 years, since 1992, has been mostly at the global or supranational level of the UN. There was the Rio Declaration of 1992, the aborted Kyoto Protocol of 1997, the disappointing meeting in Copenhagen in 2009, and most recently the successful meeting in Paris. As a global agreement has taken place, it is as if a stage has been built for action, but it is primarily local actors who are being invited to act on that stage. Even national governments do have some ability with regulatory power, such as in the United States with President Obama's Clean Power Plan to eliminate any future coal-fired electrical utilities, or at the national level in China, where they are taking 7 carbon markets that have been run on a pilot basis and nationalizing them. Those are nationally led initiatives to meet the commitments that the two countries have undertaken in Paris. But the real name of the game is becoming the actions that individual cities take, that states take, that public-private consortia and business associations all take. So with that broad framework as a background, just let me answer your specific question with 2 examples. I think the example that accompanies the agreement on December 12th, the first time in 25 years that the 190 plus nations of the world have switched from talking about action to undertaking action, there's a very significant change in political will. There is still not the degree of certainty about the political process that investors would ideally like to see, but the agreement has created a clearer and more transparent environment and has signaled that there is political will at the global and the national level to make the changes that are required to bring about a lower carbon environment. Secondly, the second concrete example I would give are just the acceleration of subnational efforts that are now underway. If the COP meetings in Paris were like the party to reach agreement, the world starting on December 13th was like waking up the next day and saying, okay, how are we going to achieve these undertakings that we have committed our nations to? For all the reasons I've mentioned, the action of state, city, and business actors, all actors at the subnational level, is absolutely vital. Last week, Ambassador Huntsman was in Philadelphia, and he was asked, as one would imagine, about the state of the campaign season in the US, and he said, he was asked, what would be your first action were you to be elected president in terms of the United States' international engagement under your administration. And he didn't hesitate a moment. He said, before I met with any one individual country around the world, I would convene a meeting of all the nation's governors. And I would say that the time has come to work on a bipartisan basis, both to retool Americans' technology around a lower carbon future and to overcome some of the paralysis of bipartisanship. So I think that's a pretty clear statement about the importance of state-level actors in this process. To take one example of the acceleration of subnational effort at the city level, at the tail end of Mayor Nutter's administration, which ended with the end of the 2015 year and the beginning of Jim Kenney's administration, Drexel University in Pennsylvania published a report about what Philadelphia will need to do to contribute to a carbon neutral national future by the year 2050. That idea of carbon neutrality, not adding additional carbon into the atmosphere, is one of the key milestones envisioned in the United Nations process. And as the elected official of the fifth biggest city in the country, the mayor recognizes that Philadelphia has a responsibility to do its part to meet that future. That will require an 80% reduction in carbon emissions by the buildings that make up the physical infrastructure of the city of Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. It can be done, but that's ambitious. And that is a gauge on the dashboard showing how subnational efforts are accelerating and continue to need to accelerate. And then finally, as a business example of the acceleration of subnational efforts, I would just point to the wonderful work that's been done by the World Business Council of Sustainable Development and the U.S. Business Council of Sustainable Development in bringing together business coalitions around specific projects to reduce carbon emissions.
Thank you very much, Terry. Those are great concrete examples. I was particularly encouraged by what you shared about Ambassador Huntsman in his comments about wanting to convene the governors. What a great call. And certainly that speaks well to the relevance and the positioning of the National Governors Association, the NGA, who we would like to continue to partner with in the future about what they're doing to manifest the U.S.-China relationship at a state level outside the State Department authority itself. And Terry, as we move to our next question, which I'm going to turn to Ben Luffel, our Director of Research, to give, I just want to say thanks, whether it was intentional or not, the way in which you talked about the global level, the national level, and then you even brought in individual level. I don't know if you intentionally did that because of the Tai Initiative 4 levels of relationship between America and China, but if you did, thank you, and if you didn't, I think it's all the more evidence of the fact that that is a very real way of looking and thinking about how we are related. So
actually, I did that because I have the honor to be teaching through the University of Pennsylvania a group of young students at the Fox Leadership International program, and each of those students is grappling seriously with what their contribution over their lifetime can be to this issue. But I tip my hat to the Tai Initiative for having done such a great job of framing that level of the challenge as well.
Well, thank you, Terry. Definitely go listen to our most recent podcast. The one that's going to come up here in just a few days is the individual level. We've just finished doing a survey in our first episode of the 4, and then we did in-depth looks at each of the 4, concluding with individual. It's not yet up online, that one episode, but as it comes, you'll see it come up on Twitter or Facebook. I encourage you to ask you and your students to go listen to the whole series as we've just gotten it started, but if nothing else, at least that individual one reflection. I hope that they enjoy it. So we're getting way off topic here. I want to get to our Director of Research, Ben Leffel, because he's going to have a question for you related to what we're seeing about city application through your Buildings Lab. Ben, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that I was very happy to represent Philadelphia on your behalf, Terry, at the U.S.-China Climate Leaders Summit. When I did so, I said, you know, Terry Cooke and probably Mayor Nutter would be here were it not for the fact that the Pope is in town. So unfortunately, they couldn't make it. And that got a little bit of a laugh. But in any case, no, Tianjin is a very important city. I mean, in my own research, I'm finding that that there are certain leader cities that kind of take a first step in these networks, and other smaller cities tend to follow. But you know, Tianjin isn't just a name; it's one of the first 8 low-carbon pilot cities selected by the Chinese central government in 2010, and also one of the cities that's been carrying out a carbon emissions trading pilot scheme since 2011. And it's very you know, it's a good thing that an innovative city like Philadelphia and is paired with such an important city in China. And I know you're very knowledgeable about the role of cities in promoting environmental protection goals, be they carbon reduction, climate change related, or just best practices in environmental protection in general. And I would love to hear your thoughts, particularly on Philadelphia as an applied example of just why cities are important, the city level is important in promoting these goals.
Very happy to, Ben. And touching on the lead-in of your question, yes, the Pope was in Philadelphia when the U.S.-China Climate Leaders Summit took place, and thank you for representing China Partnership and speaking to the climate leaders at that event. It is interesting that the Pope has an encyclical on the environmental challenge, and Xi Jinping, in some of his statements, have quite similar goals, not something that perhaps you would necessarily expect coming from the Roman Catholic Church and the Chinese Communist Party, but because of the increasing urgency and challenge of this problem, because there is a background of thought about how to tackle this problem, you are seeing a convergence in the approach of leaders in all different walks of life, and the agreement in Paris is now just accelerating all of that. To turn the topic to Philadelphia, Philadelphia was the first city in the United States to have a sister city relationship in China. For various reasons, that sister city was Tianjin. So for almost 30 years, there has been a formal relationship, but it's been a relationship largely of political symbolism and cultural exchange. The Philadelphia Orchestra, of course, was asked by President Nixon to follow him to China in the very beginning of the normalization of relations between the U.S. and China. And Philadelphia is a city of great cultural richness, has had a lot to exchange with our sister city through that. It's only with the active support of Mayor Nutter, with former Deputy Mayor Alan Greenberger, and with the new Jim Kenney administration, along with support from the Department of Energy and the Department of State under their U.S.-China EcoPartnership program, that we have grown the relationship with Tianjin to an economic and commercial relationship as well, and specifically green commercialization around a lower carbon future. The work that we are doing in 2016 focuses on our partnership with the World Business Council of Sustainable Development. I'd like to give a shout out in that respect to Bill Sisson, who helps chair the World Business Council of Sustainable Development's work in the area of energy efficient buildings. And what we are doing in Philadelphia in that area is really completely parallel and aligned with work in Chicago that is being led by former Secretary of the Treasury Hank Paulson and the Paulson Institute. Buildings account for more than 40% of the carbon emissions in China, in the US, and generally speaking, across the globe. The greatest concentration of buildings is, of course, in cities. That's practically a definition of what a city is. Transportation, by contrast, all the ships, the airplanes, the private automobiles contribute generally somewhere between 15 and 25% of carbon emissions. So the big nut to crack here is really buildings. It does not require any over-the-horizon technology breakthrough to reduce building emissions substantially. The technology exists. It's actually putting the technology to work with well-trained operators, incentivizing architects and planners to be incorporating low-carbon patterns and usages into their designs. It's encouraging cities to share data and to enforce existing regulations. It's really a human challenge more than a technology breakthrough challenge. The World Business Council of Sustainable Development, I'm going to throw just a couple of alphabet soup type names, but to situate this effort focused on energy efficient buildings, which both Philadelphia and Chicago and Houston are very actively promoting. Go back to 1997 with the failed Kyoto undertaking. In the years after Kyoto, the UN was discouraged about whether or not the almost 200 nations of the world would be able to get together behind any one plan. And while they were waiting for the dust to settle from Kyoto, they developed a set of UN Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of those goals. Many of them involve government-led action, but the one that Philadelphia is using as the basis of its partnership with the World Business Council of Sustainable Development, or the WBCSD. By the way, the UN Sustainable Development Goals go by UN SDG. The one that we are concentrating on is goal number 9, which is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Now, under UN SDG number 9, the World Business Council has mobilized the global business community into an effort that is known as the Low Carbon Technology Partnership Initiative, or LCTPI. The LCTPI works in 9 specific areas. Those are carbon capture and storage, renewable energy, energy efficiency in buildings, cement, chemicals, low carbon transport fuels, forests, low carbon freight, and smart agriculture. So quite obviously, we are working with the WBCSD for LCTPI item number 3, energy efficient buildings, under the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 9. That gives you an idea of the complexity of the overall macro process, but these are very focused efforts that have been many, many years in development.
Terry, I'm very glad that you've just made a comment there about complexity, because that's another topic that we've addressed in other ways. Just understanding that this is not a simple thing, but it's encouraging to hear from men like you who understand that in the complexity you can see where you sit. And everyone should have a good understanding of how they can contribute within a complex environment. You don't have to understand and do everything, but you know what it is that you're doing, and I think that's really great. Thanks.
And I couldn't agree more, Carson, that I know very little about most of any of those other pathways, but we are very, very focused on the energy efficient building opportunity with industry and governments working in public-private partnership. And I would point out that that Philadelphia is pleased to be in the company of Houston and Chicago as cities which have really tackled the energy efficient buildings challenge. Also New York, and under former Mayor Bloomberg, New York has the biggest concentration of buildings anywhere in the country. They've done marvelous work, though I have not seen them as visible in the US-China arena of energy efficient buildings as Chicago under Hank Paulson, Philadelphia under our China Partnership of Greater Philadelphia effort, and as is Houston. The Houston mayor was invited out to give a keynote at the US-China Climate Leaders Summit in Los Angeles, detailing their work, and they are actually the most advanced model in the United States of what the World Business Council for Sustainable Development calls its EEB lab process.
You're saying that about Houston, correct?
I'm sorry?
You're saying that about Houston, correct?
I'm saying that about Houston.
Okay, that's great. Well, we're going to have to get Houston and Chicago lined up here, Ben, right?
I actually spoke to the mayor of Houston at the summit briefly. It was brief but very interesting. So yeah, they're definitely a leading innovator in that way.
Wonderful. Terry, I'd like to give Ben a chance.
Carson, I won't impose too much detail on your audience. I can kind of wrap this right now. But to say one quick word about the EEB lab process, and then I'm assuming that you might help share a web link that can go to authoritative information in great detail about how the EEB lab process works. Is that something you could do?
Yeah, absolutely. We can attach that right onto the page that will promote this Tai Luntan as well. And
that'll be great.
So, Ben, some time on to your comments. I want to give Ben Leffel a chance if he wants to say anything and wrap up of your comments before we conclude our show here. So I'd appreciate if you can wrap up, give Ben that chance. Thanks.
Sure, I will do that in 60 seconds. The only thing that I think the audience needs to know for our purposes here about the EEB lab process is it, of course, uses and applies advanced technology, but it focuses, for the reasons that I previously described, mostly on the coordinating of the human players who are so vital to making this work. So the Houston EEB lab has a very well established and active policy committee to work on the regulatory and transparency side. It has a building operations committee so that the advanced technology can be used to its full potential and not just wasted or underutilized. There's a finance committee to try to get banks, lenders properly incentivized to support and reward energy efficient buildings. And then there's finally a communications committee that tries to get the word out to a public about what's involved and how they can play a part.
Great. That's very encouraging to know. And I guess my concluding question to you would be prefaced, Terry, by I'm noticing that your positioning, your maneuvering in the U.S.-China subnational environmental cooperation schema, particularly with Philadelphia and Tianjin, is very interesting to me. and I'm very interested to know about your work, your relatively recent development with Fox International, and if you could just share a few words about how that is complement. Number one, what the work is, very briefly, but how that is evolving into a complementary bit of work with your Philadelphia-Tianjin goals and work.
Terry, and if you could just keep them down to 2 minutes or less on this answer, please, for the sake of our closing out.
Well, thanks for that question, Ben. Increasingly, the U.S.-China 10-year framework of cooperation on energy and environment is being used as a implementation template by other countries to fulfill their nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, in the climate change process. Secretary Paulson got the 10-year framework going back in late 2008, early 2009. The U.S. and China, therefore, have had 8 years of very formalized practice in implementing binational commitments that are very similar to the global UN process. So we will be taking our Philadelphia EEB lab, getting it underway in the May-June timeframe. Then we'll be going to China for a series of events in September and in October to introduce that effort and to announce Tianjin's much hoped for support of a Philadelphia-Tianjin joint effort under these various frameworks. And our work with Fox International is simply to marshal the energies of the next generation of leaders. One of the things that makes climate change a daunting challenge is that it's a challenge that plays out over 30, 40, 50 years. It's difficult to get people to focus in terms of their day-to-day, month-to-month activity on something that is so far out, but it is vital that we find ways to do that, and bringing up and engaging in the process a generation of future leaders, whether they're future leaders at the global level, the national level, the local level, or the individual level, is the entire point of what the University of Pennsylvania and Fox Leadership International are helping make possible.
Great, thank you. Good to know.
Well, Dr. Cooke, thank you so much for your time, and thanks also, Ben, for your being here to contribute to this and be part of this ongoing dialogue. As we have listened to what you've said, I think all I'd close out with is recognizing that it would be very exciting in the months or years to come to have this kind of program be heard from your Tianjin colleague or partner. If there's someone that you can identify on the Tianjin side to be able to talk about what's happening there in that city, how exciting that would be to follow this up with such dialogue.
Well, we're looking forward to Ben going over and embedding with our partner TITA. I hope that can happen, and
absolutely. No, I mean,
let's get a guest blog or something going about that adventure and what that trip might be like and have in it.
I'm planning on
it. Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in here and listening to this episode of Tai Luntan. This has been Carson Tavener and Ben Leffel of the Tai Initiative, Dr. Cooke of the Energy Efficiency Lab, and we thank you again for listening. Tune in next time and watch the Facebook and Twitter accounts for news of our next run.
Thank you.
Thank you.